Alright guys, it's a great day. Welcome to this week's class, and the course is still knowledge and development. Our last class we discussed what knowledge is all about, things that propel development, factors that initiates development. We also look at theories of development, of which we consider the modernization theory. So today we'll be proceeding with other theories. Then next week we'll be looking at some of the indices of development. So we've discussed modernization theory. The next theory will be the structuralist theory. The structuralist theory. Please note, I'll read, then I will explain. So that's how we'll do it. So if you have any question, you can ask me in class next week. Now, the structuralist theory. Unlike the modernization theory of development, structuralism recognizes the importance of industrialization, but not in rigid sequence as proposed by the modernization theory. It is not as rigid as the modernization theory. Instead, the structuralist model of national development seeks direct government intervention in manufacturing sector to achieve import substitution industrialization. In this model, the government proposes to reduce the nation's dependency on imported manufactured goods by developing homegrown industries to manufacture goods. In so doing, the government makes direct intervention in specific sectors to stimulate industrial growth to meet local needs. Underlying the economic philosophy is the realization of the implication of the hypothesis of Singer's hypothesis, which states that over time the term of trade of primary commodities deteriorates over those of manufactured goods because the income elasticity of demand for manufactured goods is always greater than that of primary commodities. It means that local products, which are predominantly primary commodities, will continue to depreciate in value, while imported manufactured products will appreciate in value, thereby leading to trade imbalance and capital flight. To arrest the situation, a nation that is serious about its development and independence will always seek to manufacture those products which its citizens have propensity to import. It would mean import restriction and protection of local industry. Now, what is the structuralist theory trying to discuss? You know, the modernization theory, one way or the other, spoke about development in terms of industrialization, most especially patterning it in line with the Western developed country, the advanced world. But then the structuralist theory also discusses development in line with industrialization, but this time the industrialization is quite different. How is it quite different? It is because the government is involved in the process, and by so doing there is more of exportation than importation, in the sense that the government focuses more on growing industries within the nation, that can keep producing things that are needed in the nation. And most importantly, as these industries keep coming up, they keep servicing the demand of the dwellers of that country or that particular state. Sometimes there might be a sort of imbalance in development. But then what a good government should do, or what a good government ought to do, is to look at ways in which they make sure they focus their production or their development towards what the people need majorly. What do you feel people in your country import majorly? What do you feel as a government that they import majorly? What consumes your money majorly? For instance, if you look at the case of Nigeria, you discover that huge amount of money is being spent on fuel subsidy every year. Although they keep removing the subsidy every year, I don't know the subsidy that is left, but I just know that when fuel was 65 naira, they said they removed fuel subsidy to make it 97 naira. Then it dropped back to 87. They removed fuel subsidy, it became 145 or so. Then they removed another subsidy, it became 162. So I don't know the subsidy they are still removing. If Nigeria subsidy don't get to finish, it's still one debate we'll still look into. So and now they are still discussing about removal of another subsidy that will raise the price of fuel to around 300 naira per liter or so. That's the latest we are hearing in the news. So the first question I keep asking myself is, which subsidy are we removing? Why did we not remove this subsidy once and for all? Why do we keep removing subsidy gradually? If you want to develop, you want to make a change, why not just make it immediately and let everybody knows that this is the cost of this is how much, then people will be able to adapt to it. Why just remove it gradually, step by step? Well, it's my own opinion anyway. You know, people in the aim of economy would have a better explanation to why it is being done that way. But then, looking at this theory, you want to discover that it is okay, most especially for a country or for a nation who is developing, you build more industry. And you discover that one of the things that Donald Trump did when he was the US president, in his ideology of the America First, was that he said, if I would be quoted correctly, that you can't be importing goods into our country without having your company, your manufacturing company, inside our nation. So that means if you want to bring your goods, then at least set up manufacturing industry in that same nation. I think this will also train dwellers of that country. One, that's the advantage. It trains dwellers of that country. It improves employment opportunity, because they will definitely have to employ people. Because if you look at it, let me say the highest users of Micra car, the highest user of Micra car in the whole of Nigeria is Ibadan. The public transport being used in Ibadan is Micra. And in the whole of Oyo State, you can't find a Micra assembly plant in the whole of Oyo State. So you tend to look at it and you look at, we are the one that consumes this product majorly. So why can't you establish your assembly plant at least, or your manufacturing plant in that place? So structuralism focus more on production on things, so that things will be domesticated. It worked in several countries. For instance, it worked in Brazil. So there are so many issues, there are so many things that comes into play. So that's what structuralism theory is all about. It deals with production and balancing of trade. Then the other theory is dependency theory. Dependency theory. The dependency theory of national development is one of the fallout of imperialism. Okay? The dependency theory of national development is one of the fallout of imperialism, in the sense that the theory depends majorly on the survivor of finished product. Finished product. That means a country that is operating under this theory will have very little exportation and more of importation of goods and services. So they depend solely on finished goods that majorly are not produced in their country. And some of the culprits of this dependency theory is majorly the African continent. You know, technically the African continent has become the dumping site of the world. And once they produce goods, they bring it in, we consume. And most importantly, the African continent has been affected by what we call imperialism. In the sense that even, you know, Kwame Nkrumah said neocolonialism is the last stage of what? Imperialism. It's the last stage of imperialism, whereby we ourselves, we colonize ourselves. You know, we prefer to buy goods that are manufactured, that are used product from the Western country than a newly manufactured product from our own country. The product we call tokumbo, they are used products. So we value a product that has been used by someone, sent down into our own country. We value it more than a product that is newly produced and has never been used by anybody. So that's how we came across the idea of tokumbo. You see people want to go and buy something, they will say, I want to get tokumbo. What is tokumbo? The one that came from what? The Western country. So it's a dependency theory, and it is also a theory of development, and is detrimental in such a way that the terms of trade, the terms of agreement majorly favors the producer. The terms of agreement. Now you look at it now. Let's take for instance, Nigeria exports crude oil to be refined outside the country. We export it at a price and we buy it at higher price than we export. Normally, if the dependency theory will favor that when we export to you, we who owns the raw material, then you should sell back to us at a lesser price, because we should have a trade bargain that since we are the ones supplying you the raw material, then sell it back to us at a lesser price, while you can sell it to others at an higher price. But it is so fashioned in such a way that those who are depending are the losing end of the business, of the trade, and of the bargain. And that's what dependency theory is all about. But dependency theory is complementary. If you can make it complementary, then it will be a good theory for a developing nation. Why? Because everybody will focus on each area of their expertise. And see, one disadvantage of this dependency theory is the producers make sure that those that supplies the raw material, they make sure that it becomes just a single, they make sure it is being monopolized. It doesn't give room for too much of diversity in terms of diversification in terms of economy. You discover that prior to the discovery of oil in Nigeria, the economy was a bit diversified. We have cocoa, we have cashew, we have groundnut, we have coal being exported outside the country. But since the discovery of oil, we are focused majorly on this oil. They make sure that the supplier keeps supplying and focus on what they need. And it affects so much the economy of the supplying nation. So that is the dependency theory. The dependency theory is a fallout of imperialism. It is the favored economic theory of a world system in which the nations of the world are divided into core states and peripheral states. The core states and the peripheral states sandwich the semi-peripheral state, who struggle between leaving the peripheral global economic region and being absorbed into the league of core states. the apparent millennials that makes this global system possible are world trade and globalization. So, world trade and globalization. In this economic system, which incidentally is the prevalent model today, the core state specializes in the manufacturing of finished goods using advanced technology, while the peripheral states are made to produce raw material for the industries in the core countries. The peripheral states are usually encouraged to concentrate on the production of a single commodity, which is usually an agricultural produce or mineral resources. You want to believe me that one of the reasons that drew the colonialists to Africa is the deposit of the mineral resources in Africa, and that has been the turn of event. It is the dependency theory of development. It's quite elaborate. I'll get across a slide for you next week when we see it. Then another theory is neoclassical theory of development. Neoclassical theory of development. The neoclassical theory of development are later day discipline of the classical theory of development. Essentially, they argue for free market, deregulation, privatization, and non-interference of government in market. So, the non-classical theory argues for what? Free market, deregulation. A free market whereby the government does not interfere in anything. Privatization is the order of the day. You buy your goods at the price you can purchase it. You sell it at the amount you feel like. Nobody interferes in it. Nobody talks about it. There is no price control, no regulatory body in place to check the prices of your commodity. And you see, one thing that price control does in the economy is it reduces inflation. It reduces inflation rate, because you can decide to purchase a Congo of Gari at 100 naira and sell it to your customer at the rate of 2,000 naira. Someone who purchases a Congo of Gari from you at the rate of 2,000 naira, which you buy at 100 naira, might be selling rice and decide to, and when he wants to sell his rice that he or she ought to originally sell at maybe 500 naira, he decides to sell it at 5,000 naira. It what? It leads to inflation. So that is the disadvantage of free market. But then we still tend to look at it that free market is still good, in the sense that it allows people to be able to purchase things at the price they can afford and sell at a reasonable price. It has its own advantage and its own disadvantage. That's the truth. Because if you look at to a reasonable extent, the petroleum sector of Nigeria has been deregularized a bit, just a bit. You discover that the price that this filling station sells petrol might be quite different from what is obtainable in another filling station. Why? Because it has been regularized to an extent, and what you buy is what you sell. But then they still put a level of price control, a benchmark for it. So development could be a free market, but it has dangers. It has dangers. So we have people who opine that it should be a free market. So let me just say, the neoclassical theory of natural development are later this discipline of the classical theory of development. Essentially, they argue for free market, deregularization, privatization, and non-interference of government in marketplace. For them, invisible hand of free market will eventually benefit all facets of the society. The advocate of the theory called for structural adjustment program in the third world. They call for structural adjustment program, and then the need for what? Free market. But then, like I said, it has its own advantage and it has its own disadvantage. Then we have what we call the sustainable development. Okay, the sustainable development is another theory. Sustainable development theory advocates a development system that meets the need of present world without destroying the earth. It could be called a green development theory. You know, this sustainable development is advocating for moderacy in extraction of mineral resources from the earth in such a way that while you develop, you should also make sure that you balance it by not destroying the earth or the cosmos that you are living. Over extraction of mineral resources or some natural resources could cause great harm to the society. We've heard about earthquake. Yeah, we have earthquake. We have the depletion of the ozone layer, heat and everything that causes uncalled for climate change that are not that friendly to humans. So the theory is simply advocating for a way to balance man's effort to extracting minerals from nature and making sure that one way or the other they do not destroy nature. Now let me just read it. It's quite short. Sustainable development theory of natural development advocates a development system that meets the need of the present world without destroying the earth. It could be called green development theory. This theory is predicated on the menace of industrial pollution, the depletion of the ozone layer, and the fast depletion of the non-renewable energy resources of the earth. It seeks to develop the earth without exceeding its carrying capacity. The realization that the earth resources are not infinite, the realization that certain industrial activity do more harm than good to the earth got people thinking of regulating industrial activity to check the emission of greenhouse gases. Pollution is the hallmark most industrial cities. That's sick. Dangers of pollution have got something thinkers wondering if it were not better to dwell on the earth in rural simplicity than to contend with diseases associated with certain industrial pollution. Generally, the atmosphere in rural area is always better than the heavily industrialized area. So Elijah, we have something to say about this now. I deliberately mention your name because you're always complaining about Lagos being jam-packed, being sophisticated and not too good. So you have something to say about this. Maybe when we see next week, you will tell me your opinion about sustainable development. Then another one is human development theory of national development. Human development theory. The human development theory deals with fostering of human capital, developing the human person, because it is believed that when you are able to increase the capacity of human, then it will translate in the social development and the economic development of the nation. For instance, some will tell you that if you need a change in a society, inculcate that change you need into the educational system of that society from the elementary stage. Let them start thinking about it from the elementary stage. So by the time they grow up, they won't find it difficult, they won't find it hard to exhibit that change. So that is what? Human capacity development. So the human development deals with development based on human capacity. How well do you develop the intellectual capacity, the moral capacity, the psychological capacity, the sociological capacity of the inhabitant of a particular community? You want to believe me that, you want to agree with me that when you don't develop human capacity, even industrial development might be useless. Why am I saying this is, when the purpose of a thing is unknown, abuse is inevitable. So for instance, you do not equip the inhabitant of a particular community on how to operate a borehole what they are used to is the normal jack pump. You just go there and fix a borehole for them. It might become difficult for them to operate the borehole. One. Secondly, they might misuse it because they do not have knowledge about it. So as much as we look through industrial development, we must also look through what? Human capacity to develop the human person. I once read a quote when they asked someone that if the entire Japan is being destroyed, can it be rebuilt again? And the person answered that yes, it can. He said, and even more better. He said, because this Japan you are looking at that was being built is the mind of the Japanese. It is the mindset. He said, so if it is destroyed, the mindset is there already. They will build something even more better. So the mindset, human capacity, play pivotal role in what? In development. I don't know if you've come across this. You see people doing things that are wrong and they are justifying it as in comfortably, confidently. They keep justifying that action, justifying their own ignorance. You know, it could be terrible. You know, one thing that is worse than ignorance is delusion. Delusion of knowledge. When you don't know, but then you believe that you know. You know, it kills so much than ignorance. So that's one thing that human capacity development tends to address. So then we have okay, let me just stop there. Let me stop there. We continue. I've been able to explain various theories of development. So just note that you must know that the duty of a philosopher is quite different from the duty of a social scientist, a political scientist, a geographer, an economist. We don't do analysis of data. So how do we approach issues of development? We inquire into this concept. We inquire into this concept. That is what a philosopher will do. We look into some of these concepts and we look at how tenable these concepts are. We inquire into how true, how genuine are these concepts. We look critically at those concepts, not to say, okay, this theory, how many countries did it work for, or how many countries did it work for. The fact that it worked for this country does not mean it should work for this country. A social scientist will say this theory of development has worked for 100 countries, so let's go by it as the major yardstick. But a philosopher will look at the very principle, the underlying principle of that theory. We look at the underlying principle of that theory. How justifiable is that theory? How practicable is that theory? How tenable is that theory itself? So that is what you will be addressing as a philosopher. I might be asking you questions like you should juxtapose or find a nexus between some of these theories. Those could be possible questions you will be addressing. Of course, you know I love applied questions. So those could be possible questions. You might need to justify those theories, then relate it to contemporary happenings, contemporary things in the society. So till we meet next class, do have a nice weekend.